elections. When you and I grew up, it was simple. If you ran for your first grade class president, whoever got the most votes won. When you're running for president of the United States, it doesn't always work that way. In the general election, we have what's known as the Electoral College. And that is, we are a union of 50 states. And each of those states needs to get a proportional participation in the voting process so that the Californias and New Yorks of the world don't run roughshod over Vermont and Kansas. It's a great system. It's argued about every 4 years, but it has done its job for 240 years. In the primary process, as each party selects their candidate, we have primaries and caucuses, and each place you go state to state to state. And some of the smaller states have an outsized voice because Iowa and New Hampshire have traditionally been first. And if you don't do well in those two, a lot of times your campaign is all done. What Dave Bozell from ForAmerica and I are going to talk about today is as you carve up that pie, whether it's the Electoral College or whether it's the primary process, there's a lot of different pieces of that pie that help make you win. The keys to winning, if you will. That might be race, that might be the religious right, that might be a specific issue. Let's start off with race.
Sure. Great to be with you. Happy belated Thanksgiving.
Thank you very much. I hope you ate well. I hope you slept well. Sure. You look amazingly rested.
Thank you. I'm glad my family's gone.
Let's talk race. In 2008, Barack Obama won 95% of the black vote in the general election, which essentially meant virtually every black person that voted for Barack Obama. Now, black people have never made up the majority of any individual state or of the United States itself, but they do have a key element in the voting process. In 2020, Joe Biden got 92% of the black vote, performed very close to Obama. In fact, when you look at the Republicans, since Eisenhower was reelected in 1956, they've never got more than 12% of the black vote. Right. However, right now, according to a New York Times Siena poll, Donald Trump has 22% of the black vote in 6 of the battleground states. Right. Just as important, Joe Biden is all the way down to 71%. From 92, 4 years ago, to 71% now. How important is race? How much does that difference make in tipping states one way or another?
Well, in the swing states, this is going to be unbelievably important. If Donald Trump can get to that magic 12%, 88% for the Democrats, or I say Donald Trump presumably, but if the Republican nominee can get to 12 to 15% of the black vote, the Republican nominee should win. And that's that. I would say that probably the 2 most important voting blocks in 2024 are going to be the Catholic vote and the black vote.
You and I have talked before about whether or not it will be Trump and Biden. If Joe Biden is not the candidate, I've given you the Michelle Obama scenario. How much does that flip the script? If Michelle Obama becomes the candidate, does it turn that black vote into another 95, 96% vote?
Yes.
And does it change the female vote?
Yes, I think Michelle Obama presents unique challenges for the Republican nominee because of her resume, because of being the former First Lady, the opportunity to elect the first black woman. The press would be all over that. There was an NBC poll, Tim, that showed Biden at 40%. That is very, very dangerous territory. You start getting into, it reminds me of Bill Clinton during impeachment. Bill Clinton's political operation during his impeachment trial was you have to keep him over 50%. If you keep him over 50%, the Democrats will stay with him. Now, because we're so bifurcated, the country, nobody gets 50% on anything anymore. So 48, 47 becomes the new 50. According to NBC, which kudos to them, it's a low bar, but at least they reported it on their own poll, Joe Biden's at 40, which means now, just as you showed, the black vote is running away from him, females are running away from him, and you start to hit like 39, 38%, that's when the whispers become screams from within the Democratic camp to push him out of the way and get a new nominee in there.
The Center Square Voters Poll looked at Joe Biden among Democrats, looked at Joe Biden or an alternative. And he beats virtually every alternative. If you talk about Dean Phillips, if you talk about Gavin Newsom, Biden is still 20 or 30 points ahead
Mm-hmm.
of every single one of them. The one person he's not ahead of among Democrats, Michelle Obama.
Name ID. I mean, really. I mean, that's it. Gavin Newsom is cable news, folk hero, but nobody really knows him yet. So that's a name ID problem for Gavin Newsom. Notably, Michelle Obama was on Air Force One just the other day. Not her husband, Michelle Obama was. So
Right.
I don't know if we want to read tea leaves there, but she was there.
Let's talk about the women's vote. Very, very important factor here, and that is the TIPP is one of the polling groups that I trust more than any other. Historically, they are amazingly accurate. TIPP poll, only two P's, poll in November shows Trump leading Biden among women,
Right.
45 to 35. I was stunned by this number. What's happening that women are suddenly flocking to Donald Trump, or more importantly, abandoning Joe Biden?
Inflation. They're in charge of the family checkbook at home. They're seeing a roll of butter cost $6. I think that's got to be the biggest issue. Trump's challenge is going to be suburban women. The Democrats are going to use abortion to drive that wedge. And any Republican nominee's challenge is going to be abortion and how they tackle that issue, particularly with suburban women, which so often make up, if I said Catholics, I said blacks, but suburban women are probably the third most important voting demographic of this entire cycle. And that's going to make up the difference. And if he can speak to abortion properly, or at least provide a roadmap for a culture of life that folks can get behind, I think he'll be okay. But inflation has to be the number one driver for why women are turning. They voted for Trump, then they voted against Trump, and if they're flocking back, it's got to be inflation.
With the race issue, I flipped the script and said, let's put Michelle Obama in place of Joe Biden. How does that change it? And it does change it. Likewise, what if something happens and Donald Trump is not the nominee come next July and it's Nikki Haley instead? Does that change the scenario for women voters?
I think Nikki Haley has a good base of support, particularly in some of the southern swing states. We've talked about Nikki's sort of, I called it the vagina monologue sort of presentation that she sometimes has, where she just sort of blames men for everything. I don't think that's going to work in a general election. I would advise her to get out from under whatever that strategy is, just throw it back into the trash can. But she does have a good base of support among women. It's interesting, I mentioned inflation. The Washington Post is a little bit of my Bible when it comes to how do I want to see the left, what's the left's playbook? There was a story last week how the left was complaining that a guy went viral on TikTok for showing a $16 Big Mac, right? And that went nuts. And the guy was censored because he didn't get the name of the burger right. It wasn't technically a Big Mac. It was a quarter pounder with bacon, so therefore it was a premium burger. And if anyone's ever had a quarter pounder, it ain't premium. But the left just went apoplectic, like, well, we just can't have these high prices. We can't have these things go viral. In the story, though, it says that the left's political prescription for Biden or any other Democratic nominee is one of two things: either be sympathetic to the voter for having to buy all these very expensive goods and services, or just blame the corporations. So just blame McDonald's. And he was doing that all last week. So facts for thee, you got to get the name of the burger right, and no facts for me. I can just blame corporations for all my ills.
The biggest key here, I think, out of everything is voters that are registered independent. Mm-hmm. Obviously, if it's Trump and Biden, Trump has people that are going to stay with him no matter what. There are Republicans that will vote for the Republican nominee no matter who it is. And even though a big chunk of Democrats wish someone other than Joe Biden was the nominee, if he's the nominee, there's a big chunk that will stay with him.
Right.
In the middle, though, are independents. They make up roughly a third of the voters. And so whomever can attract those people is likely going to win. There's a great poll out by Quinnipiac University that shows Joe Biden at 31%, Donald Trump at 30%,
Okay.
and RFK Jr. at 36% among independents.
Among independents.
How much does RFK or some other credible third party or independent candidate throw the whole thing up for grabs?
RFK, I think, hurts Joe Biden more than he hurts Donald Trump. And I know there's some Trump voters that are attracted to his presentation as well. But the fact that he's overtly socialist when it comes to gun control and climate change, I think is a non-starter for most Republican-leaning voters. But I think that RFK Jr. hurts Biden tremendously. It's Ross Perot, but flipped. And that's why they've kept him out of the whole Democratic primary process and forced him to go independent, which was a huge mistake.
Final note, and I started this thing out by saying, in first grade we learned elections were whoever gets the most votes. In the presidential sweepstakes, it doesn't always work that way, as Hillary Clinton learned long after first grade. So Kennedy is winning some states outright with voters under the age of 45.
Okay, now we're talking.
Let's just throw this thing one last curveball, and that is, what if a third-party candidate wins some states and no one gets to 270? How important does control of Congress become at that point?
Well, if I know my civics properly, at that point it becomes a state rep who controls the more number of states in the House. So I think we're at 30 to 20 of the 50 states, Republicans to Democrats. I might have my math off by a few, but control of the House of Representatives becomes the number one priority. I mean, it's the conventional wisdom is the Republicans will lose the House and win the Senate because the map is so unfavorable to Democrats. But the priority needs to be, because of the power of the purse, needs to be Republicans retaining control of the House. And your scenario, now it becomes double the priority.
It all goes back, I look at past years and I think of who was leading in November and December in any given year. Herman Cain and Newt Gingrich were right up there with Mitt Romney. Neither one was a factor anywhere in the actual primaries. And so we look over and over and over. It doesn't sort itself out, and still until this year, it'll be January 15th is Iowa, and a couple of weeks later we're in New Hampshire. So by the end of January, we'll have a much narrower field and probably a better idea of where things are headed.
This time in 2015, Jeb Bush and Scott Walker were still there and still leading, and quickly evaporated. So things can change fast.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah.
David Bozell, For America. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Tim Constantine for the Washington Times. Be well.